I am live. I am live. I am live. I swear to you, I am alive. Hi, I'm Robin Da Vinci, and I'm going to keep on this topic of teen money literacy, but I'm going to explore something that's going to happen to a lot of you teens listening, parents listening, grandparents, guardians, your grown children, after you've done all this work, sent them to college, they've gone off, they've lived on their own, they've lived with their friends, maybe they got married and then they got divorced, um, and they moved back home. It's a huge deal for grown children who have lived away, who have done a lot of things on their own, who have made big decisions. All those things come into play, and then they move back home. And then they go back to the bedroom they once had. You might still have their old furniture. You might still have some of their stuff in the drawers, and you're still in the same house. And so it's very easy for them to just move back in and everybody to go back to the way it was when they were kids. And that's a no. That's a big NO. If you paid for your children to go to college and or to get out on their own and gave them a monthly allowance and said, "You know what? You can do it. You can do it." And they got a full-time job and they made decisions and they bought a car and they did all these things. And then all of a sudden in their 20s, they find themselves not being able to handle it. And they say, "Mom, Dad, Grandma, can I come back home? Can I move in with you for just a little while?" I've seen it 1,000 times. I've dealt with it a lot. I've dealt with clients who have that happen to them. I've dealt with people who say, "I don't want to move back home, but I've got to. I'm a mess." And I mean, I have a bunch of stories. And of course, you're going to let your children move back home. For the most part, most parents say, "Okay," or "Go live with grandma and grandpa, go live with your aunt and uncle," or, something like that, but we'll work it out. We'll make sure you're all okay. And so what happens is you end up with this grown up living back in your house as though they're kids. And that's a problem because what science tells you and what psychologists tell you, and they're in sync with this, is that when you go back home, you fall very easily into the pattern you had before you ever left. So, in other words, if you were the oldest of five, you were the youngest of two, you were the middle kid, whatever it was, when you get back home, your first instinct is to go back to the way it was. I'm the oldest, I got my way most of the time, or I'm the oldest and I didn't get my way, and I'm more cooperative than the younger one. The younger one comes home and acts like a brat. And you go, wait a minute, you guys are 26 years old or 31. What are you doing? This is our house and our rules. You're going to find that doesn't work. A teenager, firstly, doesn't want to go by the rules because a teenager wants to believe they're grown up enough to make their own rules. They actually, think of yourself as like the Autopia at Disneyland. There's railings that make sure you don't go too off track and the car can't go into the bushes. But when you're a parent and of teenagers, usually with every subject, it's a big tug to get them to listen to you. It's really hard, and a lot of the times they don't hear you. And as soon as they move back home, they start to do that again. And you'll say, "How is this happening? He was 18 when he left home. He's lived 7 years away, or she's been away 10 years, and now she's back home. She's not picking up her clothes. She's not offering to wash the dishes. She's not keeping her bathroom clean. She's not contributing to the house. I don't understand." Well, here's the scoop: do not allow your kids back unless you set up rules. And I mean the rules you can live with now, not the rules you had before. I don't know how many of you had friends who had kids in college or when you went to visit your children when they lived away. And that was when you really had an idea of what kind of parenting you did when you see how they live. When my daughter first moved away and found a house, I got up there to move her in with my family. and it was an old beach house that a lot of boy students had lived in, male students had lived in, and it was a mess. And the carpet smelled like ocean, and the garden was dead, and the paint was chipping, and the refrigerator smelled, and the heater unit didn't really work. And the landlord said, "Hey, it's as is." Now, it was a great place for her to live as far as convenience to the school in a rather safe neighborhood, but it had been a college rental and it had fallen apart. Well, I didn't really have the means back then. I never have been a rich lady or anything. I mean, but I couldn't let my daughter live there. So I went halves on new carpet. My son painted the house. We fixed the heater and we put plants in and we made it safer for her. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that. It was just for my peace of mind because she lived hundreds of miles away. And I felt compelled to do that. But if she had moved back home, the rules for one of my children moving back in would have been so different than the rules I tried to enforce when they were teenagers. They indeed have come back and said to me, "Mom, now that I live on my own and I have families and whatever, I get what you went through. I really want to say I really understand how much work it is and how much it takes to be able to raise a family." So remember this. When your kids have been away, you probably said, "Oh, they're away. I don't have any rules." Or, if you were giving them money, you might have had rules about the money you gave them. Or if you were paying the rent on their unit, you had influence over how it looked because a security deposit was on the line, or the landlord would call and say, "Your child is wrecking my unit, I don't want them here." So you might have had a vested interest in it. But if your child went out on their own, got a job, was paying their own way, and somehow came upon a fork in the road where they couldn't make it anymore and they had to come home, then you have to set the rules. Now, I'm not saying set arbitrary rules where they're not involved. Don't do that. Sit down together and say, "Okay, on the first of the month, you're moving back in. Let's see how this is going to work. Let's look at the parameters of our rules. Let's look at our boundaries. Let's talk about consequences. Let's talk about communication." One of the things that is most important when your grown child comes back is that they have to respond to where they are, and tell you where they're going and when they'll be home, because now they live in a community and they have to let you know. So you're not saying, "Oh, you can't go out with your friends till 2 in the morning." You're just saying, "Can I expect you by 2 in the morning? Or are you staying somewhere so that I know not to worry?" Because kids, parents always worry. I don't care if you're 80 and they're 50, they're going to worry. So if you move back home, hear me clear, there are some things you're going to have to give up. And that's that autonomy of being able to go out and come back and do whatever you please. If you're going to move back into your parents' home, be prepared to contribute monetarily, be prepared to have grown up rules, be prepared to help clean the house, mow the lawns, contribute to utilities, not waste water, recycle, um, keep your car in a safe place, um, it, do not block the driveway, take out the trash, bring in the trash cans. You've got to do all those things. And it's really good, parents, listen to me, please, that you do this before they ever leave home so that they're a good roommate or a good spouse for someone else. Not training, not discussing, not communicating these things with your kids makes it harder for them when they're out there by themselves. It is not a good thing to ignore this and say, "Oh, they're kids, let them go." No, you need to sit down all the way through their development and talk about money and behaviors, because behaviors work when money works. If they understand the value of money, the value of budgeting, the value of the work you did to raise them, they will be better roommates, better partners, better spouses, better workers at an employer's business. They'll be better at everything. So this grown children moving back home is something that you can't avoid. So many millions and millions have it happen every day. And sometimes they come back with a child or the spouse and your child move back in with a child. So you're changing your lifestyle where maybe when they went away to college, you went, "Phew, I can make a sewing room or a gym, or we can downsize to a condo." And then all of a sudden, 7 years later, they're back home, not just by themselves, but with a spouse, with a child, with other children, more more people. And you have to be able to speak up, put the rules down and say it's different now. It's different now. We're older, we want cooperation and we want communication. And we're not going to fight about these things because you're going to sign something that says you understand the rules. And if you're yelling at the TV saying, I'm not going to put rules in place, then what's going to happen is that whole situation is going to fail. It's just like if you don't tell your kids about checking accounts and you don't help your kids with cash and you don't get them insured properly and you don't talk about all those things, I guarantee you, you will fail. It is something that I hear all the time. And you hear, oh, I've got it. My child has to leave. I can't stand it. I can't live with them. My child's obnoxious. I will not live with them. They need to get out on their own. But what have you done in the time that they came back to prepare them to go back out on their own and be a success? I'm going to leave you with this because it's very important. In the very, very old days before I was ever born, and that was a long time ago, it was when you're 18, you're out of the house, you've got a job, you start a family, you make it all work. The world has changed drastically, but we're still parents. And when you decide to have a child, it's 24/7. And you can't be sure that you're going to have one of those children that goes out and makes millions or hundreds of thousands and buys a big house and goes on trips and is a wonderful spouse and has children they put through private school. Maybe that's a dream of parents, but let's be honest, most of us can't do that, right? So it starts early. The foundation starts early so that if you think you don't want your kids back, do the work now. Do the work now. It's the truth. Sorry. So follow me on YouTube, like and subscribe. Go to robindavinci.com and you'll find a lot of good advice. Next episode is going to be on what kind of kids need what kind of insurance, because I've talked about auto insurance and excess liability and renter's insurance a little bit. But the big thing I want to talk to you is about medical insurance, but the other insurance as well. So the next topic coming up on Thursday is going to be insurance. I want you to know that it's a very important topic and you can't afford to be without it when you have a young person in your life. So thank you very much. Like and subscribe. I'm Robin Da Vinci and I care. Bye.